InDigital is on a mission to improve the 911 industry. Our goal is to create something better to go above and beyond the current standards. Our passion for creating the most advanced, well-designed solutions led to our position as an industry leader in next-gen core services. For the millions of calls processed over our emergency IP networks, to our Text for 911 solution, Texty, to our disaster recovery and backup solution, Mevo, it's easy to see we love what we do. For more information, check us out at www.indigital.net.
Rapid Deploy believes that every public safety agency, regardless of size, should have access to the data they need when it matters most. That's why since 2016, our mission has been to reduce emergency response times and improve public safety. We are the industry's only integrated emergency response platform. Our web-based cloud platform includes analytics, mapping, dispatch, and mobile apps, purpose-built for 911 in the 21st century. Visit www.rapiddeploy.com to learn how we enable effective, efficient, data-driven emergency response.
If Within the Trenches has ever taught you something, open your eyes to what it is like to be a 911 dispatcher, or has inspired you to become one, then help support us and join our Patreon. Get exclusive bonus content, one-of-a-kind swag, discounts on merchandise, ad-free early access to new episodes, and much more. To join, please visit patreon.com/WTT podcast. And if you're an industry partner, we have something for you as well. And now, for the show.
This is Jordan, and you're listening to the Code 7 Podcast Network.
Warning. This episode contains the 3 A's of podcasting: adult content, adult language, and awesomeness. You've been warned.
Welcome to Within the Trenches, true stories from the 911 dispatchers who live them.
Hey, what's going on? This is Ricardo with the Code 7 Podcast Network, and this is going to be episode 332 of Within the Trenches, true stories from the 911 dispatchers who live them. This episode is sponsored by InDigital and Rapid Deploy, and I just want to thank, as always, the sponsors, as well as patrons and everyone who listens, the supporters. Thank you all so much for everything. And we are getting closer. It's July 3rd right now. In a couple of weeks, this episode will be posted. But when this gets posted, we'll be 1 week away from an announcement that I have been teasing for weeks now. And it's coming. It's going to be awesome. You'll see soon what what is coming up. But I just wanted to thank everyone more than anything. It's been an amazing time. It's been such a great experience. And this episode I am excited for. This is going to be good. There's so much that we're going to be talking about here, and I'm just stoked. So my guest today is going to be Kimberly, and she's a dispatcher with Carilion PD out of Virginia. And let me bring her back up on here. Hey, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Now, did I pronounce that right?
You did. Carilion PD. That is correct. Yes.
Okay, cool. Oh, man. There are times where I will have someone come on, and whether it's face-to-face or we're doing it like this, and they'll say the name of their agency, and I'll just kind of say, maybe you should save that one because I'm going to mess it up.
Yep.
So good. Everything came out okay on that one. So, this is going to be interesting as well, because the police department that you work for is a private department that's in a hospital, and we're going to get to that here soon. For those who are watching and those who are listening, we had this email exchange between Kimberly and I, and she had mentioned in her email that yes, this is a real PD with sworn officers, and so this is good because I'm trying to think, out of all of these episodes, I'm not sure if I have had anyone on with a private PD out of a hospital. So this will be interesting to see, because you mentioned that a lot of the things are universal across
Mhm.
agencies, and
Absolutely.
size, public, private, whichever. There's a lot of things that are the same, and you had a realization. So we're going to get to that here momentarily, but I want to go back in time, and I want to learn more about you and have the listeners, the audience, learn more about you as well. How did you get into public safety to begin with?
I'm one of those that stumbled into it. I don't have anyone in my family who is public safety at all. No fire, police, EMS, nothing. Um, and I stumbled into it a little bit later than a lot of people do. I was 33 when I started working as a dispatcher, and I was just looking for a job. I wanted something that was, important. Not that any job isn't important, but you know what I mean? I wanted something that I felt was making a difference.
Mhm.
And I just applied, and it's been 13 years, and I've been with 4 different agencies, and I love it.
Man, so you get that. Did you do like a sit along or anything? I mean, you stumble into this, but I mean, what was that like for you in the beginning? Again, did you go in and sit for a little bit and think, all right, I think I can do this, or what was it?
Nope, there was no sit along for me. Not at that agency. At subsequent agencies, there was, but
Hmm.
at that first agency, no. I went into it completely blind. Um, I do have a little bit of a story about my interview.
Hmm.
Um, a lot of the agencies do the panel interviews. You have several people who interview you. So I sat with 3 folks, and they go through these predetermined questions, and they ask you all these different things. Well, they get to this one question, and it was, describe yourself in one word. Well, I'm a very blunt person. I really don't hold anything back. What you see is what you get.
Hmm.
And that question hit me, and I said, that is a terrible question. I said, how do you describe a person in one word? And then I look at their faces and I go, oh, great. And one of you probably wrote the question. So I just offended you. So that's great. And then I said, well, you know, if you have to pick one word, I guess I'd pick smart. And then we moved on. Well, we get done, and I call my husband. I'm like, I blew it. There's no way I'm getting this job. My mouth ran. And he said, well, how did you answer the question? And I said, well, I ended up saying that I was smart. And he goes, smart? You didn't even say intelligent. You said smart. I was like, yeah. And I mean, unbelievably, they actually called me back and they hired me. But yeah, that was my great first impression.
Nice. Well, uh, hearing that, they probably thought, "Yep, she's one of us," because that is a dispatch response. At least in my opinion, that's what I would think. I would look at my whoever was in there with me, the panelists, after you had left, and been like, "Yeah, that was a response we were looking for." It's that's almost like the Shawshank Redemption. Have you seen this Shawshank Redemption?
I have, but it's been years.
Okay, well, so Morgan Freeman's character, when he finally gets his parole, and they bring him in, and he says, "Do you think that you've been rehabilitated?" And he goes, "Rehabilitated is just like a made up word so that you can come in here." And he gives a response. It's such a blunt response that he ends up getting his parole. And in that type of response, like you know, I I don't care what you can do to me, anymore. Just do whatever you're gonna do. That blunt type response is like something we would do in dispatch as well. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, because we're taking so much of from callers or officers or whatever. It's like you can tell me whatever you're gonna tell me, but this is how it is.
Yeah. Yeah. And actually, the supervisor that actually ended up, hiring me,
Mhm.
I told her, I said, I thought, forget it. That was it. I wasn't getting this job. And she said, no, we really appreciated the honesty. We thought that was really good. So I said,
There you
well,
go.
you'll get lots more of it. So
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for bringing me on. I will be honest with you all the time. Oh man, that is excellent. I am sure those who are watching and listening right now can definitely relate to that. So you end up going through that process. You've got this panel, and you are brutally honest, and you get the position. what is it like for you that first day? Kind of describe when you're coming into the center to work. What is it that you're seeing, and how did that training start out?
Well, she started out with a little tour of the center. And of course, the
Mhm.
center is basically one room, but there's still all these different things in the center. For those who have worked in centers, of course, they know. Anybody who hasn't ever worked in a center, there's multiple consoles. Every console has all these TV screens and monitors, and there's other screens that you usually see. You're monitoring something, whether it's the roadways or the building that you're in or other buildings. They're up on screens, and there's round tables with all these different books and manuals and all this stuff. And she's going through everything, and she's going really fast, and she's like, well, this is the teletype computer, and this is where we monitor this, and then these are the books where we call these people every day to check on them, and then we do this and we do this. And I mean, it was just all these things, just a barrage of things in about 20 minutes as she blows through the center. And I remember thinking, what did I do? Like, this is way more than what I thought this was going to be. I
Yeah,
was completely overwhelmed.
man. Yeah, no, I can relate. I felt the same way. So when I first started dispatching, I actually started in Central Florida. I'm originally from Southwest Michigan, but I went to visit my mom, my grandmother, my siblings, and I ended up staying there for 3.5 years. I I found, um, as cliche as it sounds, my calling. Working in 911 dispatch. It was for a small police department, but I went in, and it's just a small area, a few screens, nothing major, but for something that I had never seen before, it was a lot. And to watch my trainer, to observe him take a 911 call, and then him look at me and say, "You're next," that was something as well, because I thought he was joking. And I remember kinda chuckling, and I said, "No, really?" And he just, you know, piercing through my soul, telling me, "Yeah, no, you are next." And I remember saying, I thought there was more to this. I thought there was more training that would come into this." And he goes, "Well," he goes, "Yeah, but, this is the way you learn, is on the job." A week or so later, I did take a beginner's, 911 dispatcher course, but that first night, which was a midnight shift, that's how my training went. He showed me around as well, gave me a tour like you got a tour, and then bam, that first or the second call, that was mine.
It
And
was yours.
yeah, it ended up just being, I think it was like a 911 hang up or a missed dial or something like that. So it really wasn't anything of substance,
Hmm.
but I was scared. I was shaking. I was like,
Oh,
what
yeah.
happened here?
Yeah.
Because my only experience with 911 dispatch, up until that point, was Rescue 911, with
Oh.
William Shatner. So
Hmm.
that's all I really had. I mean, they didn't really show dispatch or anything on cops, so that's all I knew about. But
Yeah.
like it was definitely overwhelming. And then switching over to a central dispatch when I moved back to Southwest Michigan, then that was a whole different level right there. Um, so you're in training. How long did the training last?
I was very, very fortunate. I've heard lots and lots of dispatchers who literally, like you, were just kind of like thrown in there. I did not get thrown in there. We had a very extensive training program at
Mhm.
the agency that I started at. Um, and so I think it was about 9 months or a year total. You did so many months on phones, and then you switched to police. That agency only had police, did not do fire and EMS.
Gotcha.
So yeah, but I was very, very fortunate. It was a very extensive training program, the daily VORs, everything like that.
Wow. And I say wow too, because when I went to the central dispatch center, and I guess it's because I had experience already. I already had 3.5 years, but there was still a big difference in call volume, um, that some of the types of calls, the amount of officers that I dealt with, but all the other agencies as well, fire and EMS. Um, I think my training was 3 or 4 months is what it
Oh,
ended up
wow.
being. But we did it in phases as well.
Hmm.
We had our first phase where we were just learning geography and then like non-emergency calls. The second phase was, um, NCIC
Mhm.
area, and we're running plates and warrants and all of that. And then the third phase was main radios for law enforcement, which was a lot of fun. But then, the fourth phase was the shadow phase, and that's when you're in there. The trainer's on the other side of the room, and you are just working with all of your partners in there, and working like a team. There's a lot of stuff that I had done while I was training, but you as well. You had a bunch of different types of calls, and sometimes some of these calls, some of the people who end up taking calls like that are similar to the ones that you took, they either realize, yeah, this is for me, or no, I don't think that this is for me. I have a friend that I actually grew up with, a childhood friend, and she ended up being my supervisor at one time at the dispatch center that I was working at, which was weird that we would end up working together years later. But while she was in training, she ended up taking a triple homicide call,
Mm.
and was that was something else. And I remember asking her, like, "And you stayed, why did you stay?" And she goes, "Because this is what I wanted to do, that wasn't gonna scare me off." She goes, "It was crazy and all, but, I dealt with it and I did it." And she's actually still there now at the dispatch center. She's their training coordinator. So, there's a lot
Yeah,
that she ended up getting out of that.
that was the same with me. I just kind of fell in love with it. As crazy as it was, as overwhelming as it was, as challenging as it was at first, I really just fell in love with it. I did in training. We did have well, it was actually a call that presented as a car accident,
Mhm,
and it was Easter Sunday. I was about, I guess, 2 or 3 months into the training, and I had passed the phone part of the training, but I wasn't authorized to actually do anything on my own yet. Even though I passed the phone part, I wasn't supposed to answer the phones without having somebody monitor me, just
mhm.
to make sure. Well, we get this call that there's a car accident, a car into a pole. And when they get on scene, they realize that the reason the car crashed was because it turned out a drug deal had gone bad, and the person in the back seat had shot the person in the front seat driving and the passenger, in the head, and that's why the car crashed. And so we had a double homicide on
Whoa.
Easter in the middle of my training, and the phones blew up because we did one of those reverse 911 calls asking people to keep an eye out for this suspect vehicle that had picked the person up, and all that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
And I looked at my trainer, who was absolutely bombarded, and the other girl, who was absolutely bombarded, and I said, "I'm answering the phone." And they said, "Go ahead." You know what I mean? And I just started answering phones and just kind of kicked in. And I think that was probably when the bug really, really bit me, which sounds kind of terrible in a way, but that's, I don't know. You really fall in love with it. You either love it or you hate it.
Right. Yeah. No, exactly. And a lot of people have said the same thing. And those who are watching and listening that are in the general public, yeah, I'm sure that sounded different, but I think it's the same thing in any profession. They could be a surgeon who did some sort of crazy surgery or something and would look at friends and family and say, "That was amazing."
Hmm.
And they would say, "Are you serious?" For real? I've said this before in the past where friends and family, when I was working in dispatch, they would say, "How are things going at work?" And I would say, "Man, it's been pretty slow. There hasn't been a lot going on." And they would say, "Well, isn't that a good thing? Like, don't you want it to be slow? That means people aren't calling for help." And I would say, No, I understand that. You got to understand as well is that I'm there to help people,
Hmm.
and that's why I'm there." And I wanna do something. I wanna be able to help those people, and then, they would understand that. But it's also the same thing with how you're saying, I've asked the question, "What was your favorite type of call to take?" And I would tell people my favorite type of call to take were domestic calls, and that on the same sense, people would say, "Oh, I mean, that's kinda dark." And I would say,
Yeah.
"No, no, no, it's you don't get it. It's the reason those are my favorite to take or were my favorite to take is because I that's where I was helping the most. I was getting the officers there to whoever was there. I was trying to keep people separated. If they had been hurt, I was getting EMS to them. Like all of my resources, every single um, talent, if you will, I was putting into that call.
Mhm.
And if it's the difference between taking a call for a fireworks complaint or a domestic call, I'll take the domestic call because that's
Yeah,
the one where I am helping people the most. And
yeah,
and that's what I
absolutely.
mean. And people are like, "Oh, okay, I get it."
Yeah, it is odd because we do handle things that are terrible and that are awful, and yet they're very meaningful, and we do make a difference with those calls. And yeah, one of my quote unquote best calls, that I think, was actually a woman who called who was suicidal,
Mhm.
and you could tell she was very, very emotional and very distraught. And it actually took them about 15 minutes to get there. And so I was just talking to her the whole time. Um, but I really felt like I helped her. I really
Mhm.
felt like the things that I said, and telling her that, I didn't want her to hurt herself, and that she had things to live for. I really felt like it made a difference. And at the end of the call, when the officers got there, she said, "Thank you, thank you so much." And yeah, I mean, it was a terrible circumstance, but I really felt like I made a difference at the end of that call.
What was that feeling like? Because not a lot of those calls are good outcomes. A
Yeah.
lot of the times they're bad outcomes, but there are
Yeah.
those rare good moments. And that person said thank you, and you
Hmm.
found out about that. How did that how did that feel?
I mean, it's amazing. I mean, it is amazing. It's, I don't even really know how to describe it. It really does feel, um, like you have done something significant and that you have made a difference to somebody. And I think that's one of the big things that kept me in it. Aside from being a little bit of an adrenaline junkie and loving that,
Yeah.
everything just kind of goes, just knowing that what I do actually does really impact people, and on a very basic level, um, has just made a big difference to me.
Yeah, there are so many, um, different things in dispatch, and those moments are the ones that make it worth everything. When you're driving home and you think about the day, yeah, there's probably some hard calls that you took as well, but there's that one takeaway that you'll have as
Mhm.
well that you did something, you contributed, you helped out the community or those out in the field, and that's what makes it all worth it. That's what I would come back to whenever I would have a hard day or something, a hard shift rather. I would try my best to think about those moments where someone said thank you, or I got that closure from EMS or fire when they would call in for their numbers, and I would ask them, what happened out there, and then they would tell me, you did everything you could. Those moments are the ones that also last and stick with you. Uh,
Absolutely.
so you had other things that happened in training. I mean, there was an incident that actually happened where your trainer kinda, you know, they had to take over.
Yeah. Yeah, that was training at the second agency I worked at. I had worked in Florida for the first part of my career.
Mhm.
Then I came to Virginia and I went to work for an agency in Virginia. And in the middle of the training there, um, anyone who hasn't worked in a dispatch center, when a big call happens and there's a trainee, there's a tendency that trainers will kind of jump in there, and they'll push the trainee aside, so to speak, and they'll take over. Well, that's kind of what happened to me. We had an incident where actually a law enforcement officer from another jurisdiction drove into our jurisdiction, and unfortunately he shot and killed his wife in a retail parking lot here. And when the call came in, well, one, we had a barrage of calls, but when our particular call came in, my trainer heard this woman saying, someone's been shot. And she said, push me out of the way. She said, well, what happened? And they said, well, this officer got out of his car and went up and shot this woman. And my trainer said, officers don't do that. And
Mhm.
it was like, that was just her reaction. She just couldn't believe that had happened.
Right.
And even having done this for so long, sometimes there's just some things that happen that you can't believe it. um, I'll listen to 911 calls from other people, and my family will sometimes listen with me, and somebody will say, I've been shot. And you'll hear the operator say, I'm sorry, did you say you've been shot? And my family's always like, why do you do that? And I'm like, because there's this level of, one, disbelief, and
Hmm.
two, you want to make sure you heard them right. Like,
Right.
is that
Exactly.
really what you heard? Did you really say, that that's what happened? And so, yeah, so that was an interesting incident as well. You never know what's going to happen at any given moment.
Right. Exactly. I tell people all the time, when people are calling 911, it's not because they're calling on the best day of their lives. And when someone says something to you, no matter how ridiculous it might sound, you always have to take it as priority one, until you find out otherwise, because it'll be that one time that someone might not take it, um, like it's a priority one, and it turns out that that's what it
Mhm.
is. Even if someone is telling me they're being attacked by aliens, something is going on. They
Right.
might not be attacked by aliens, but something is definitely going on. So,
Yeah.
you have to treat every situation like it's a high priority. So there were a lot of different things that you dealt with in training, and those who are watching and listening, this happens in
Yeah.
training at any time. You can be the most seasoned dispatcher, call taker, and this shit is going to happen. And you just go back to your training. Everything ends up coming in, and you work it the best way possible. Now,
Mhm.
also going along with that, I mean, you also had a time, and I'm not sure which agency this one was at, but you got a chance to assist with the birth of a baby. How did that go
Yeah.
down? Because it sounds like it might have been at a fast food restaurant in a parking lot.
That's exactly what it was, actually. Yeah, so the one and only time that I've assisted in delivering a baby, um, I get this call, and it's the father that's calling me. And
Mhm.
he said, my wife's in labor. She doesn't think we're going to make it to the hospital. We've pulled over. It was actually a Wendy's parking lot. And I was like, okay. This particular Wendy's was literally less than a mile from the fire station that the ambulance was coming out of. So I
Mhm.
thought, oh, there's no way this baby's going to be born before they get there. This is, we're good. This is all good, right?
Yeah.
Well, for anyone who doesn't work in a dispatch or doesn't have EMD, emergency medical dispatch, there's these cards that we have that we refer to give instructions on how to handle different medical situations. And so there's certain cards that you can kind of read and pick different questions off of, and instructions off of based on the circumstance. And then there's others that you're supposed to read word for word. Well, birthing a baby is one of the ones that you're supposed to read word for word. You're supposed to tell them exactly what's on that card, and follow the script exactly. So I'm looking at these instructions, and it's like, well, lay them on a flat surface and gather towels. And I'm like, we're in the back seat of a car in the parking lot of a Wendy's. So
Right.
what? Grab napkins? Like, what am I supposed to tell this man to do?
Yeah.
And so I'm winging it, because I'm just trying to kind of get as close to the wording as possible, and give him instructions. And he gets her in the back seat, and she's laying down, and all of a sudden he's like, no, no, the baby's coming, the baby's coming. And I'm like, well, grab the baby's head. And and so this is the one and only time I've actually cried on the dispatch floor. He said, when the baby was born, he said, it's a girl. And he started to choke up. And
Oh,
so it made me choke up, because I was like, oh my gosh, and, he's had the baby.
yeah.
But what's really cool is, you talked about closure.
Mhm.
We don't get a lot of closure. Well, I specifically asked, one of my supervisors to find out later how they had done, and if everything had gone okay, and the baby was okay, and mama was okay, and they were. But what was really neat is that about 3 months later, I think it was, I went into my local 7-Eleven, actually, which was literally right down the street from my house. And I'm in in the store, and this girl behind the counter is talking, and she's saying, she's talking about the birth of her baby. And she said something, I can't remember what it was, but I was like, I think she's the one who had the baby in the parking lot. And so I went up to her and I said, I'm sorry, I know this is a really weird question. I said, but did you give birth to the baby in the parking lot of the Wendy's? And she goes, yeah. And I said, okay. I said, that's crazy, because I was the dispatcher on the phone that helped your husband or your boyfriend, deliver the baby. And she
Yeah.
said, you're kidding. And I said, no. And she starts showing me pictures and all this of the baby. And I said, I got to ask, did you name her Wendy? Because I just had to know. And she said, no. She said, but I will be honest, we do occasionally call her Little Wendy. And so, but it was really cool, because I actually did get to meet her just completely with happenstance and, see pictures of the baby. So that was pretty neat.
Oh man, that is awesome. I can, as you're telling the story, like I'm getting goosebumps just as you're just thinking about it, because you're telling the story and I can see all of this taking place in my head. And just that realization, that also that nervousness of wanting to go up and say, that was me. I know you. I know you. And
Yeah.
just
Yeah,
that
I thought she's gonna
moment.
think I'm crazy asking this question, but like I forget what it was that she said, but it was something, and I thought, no, that's her. Like I just knew that was her.
Oh man. So, I have not had, um out of the years that I worked in dispatch, not had that type of interaction. I did see callers that I spoke to, but that was like in court when they when they brought us in, and some of those you don't want people to know who you are.
No,
And
no.
especially if a bad call, of course. Well, if you're going to court, it's usually a bad thing anyway. But when I remember going into the courthouse and they were bringing me to the back, and I went up to the window and I gave my name, and they said, oh, you're the dispatcher who took the call. And I thought, why like, why would you do that, man? Because the caller was sitting right there in the
Oh,
lobby, and I just looked down, and the reason I knew the person was because, the officers had us running, information and getting pictures of those involved and all this other stuff, so I knew that person was there, so when they said, "Oh, you were the dispatcher who took the call," I'm like, "Yes." Bring me to the back already,
yeah, really.
because this isn't an interaction that I wanna have. Um, but with you, that is amazing. I worked a couple, birth calls. One of them was the closest that I would ever get to getting one of those stork pins, but and I this is episode 332. I've told this story many times, but it's still funny to me, and also makes me cringe a little bit, because the dad ended up running from his house to the neighbor's house to drop off the other child, and then go back to mom, who was in labor. And I had already gone through EMD and was giving him all this information, the towels and all this other stuff. And when he gets back, the baby had already been born, and I thought, oh no, it was so close.
Oh,
You know,
yeah,
they
yeah.
could have named the child Ricarda if it was a girl, instead of Ricardo. But either way, those calls, there's nothing like those calls. I mean, they're intense. You know what's going on, and also, and you can attest to this as well. Everything in your mind, what you're listening to, you're imagining all of it as it's going on, because you then have to piece that together and give it to those who are en route, so they know what they're going to. So it was probably intense as heck during the call, but they're in the car, it might not have been as intense, in a way, because it's in your imagination. Um, so man, that's hard to top that one. That is an excellent one there, and I like how you how they said, we sometimes call her Little Wendy. No, that is cool. How long ago was that then?
Oh, goodness. Let's see. That one was probably about 5 years, maybe something like that. I think now. Yeah.
See, and those are one of I always have a question for those that I interview, when we're talking about calls, asking what is one of the calls that has stuck with you? And, a lot of times and you might have, a harder call that has stuck with you, but this one definitely will always stick with you. And
Oh, yeah.
that is amazing. That is such a good call, something to look back on as well. The fact that you were able to meet them out of nowhere at a 7-Eleven. That
Yep.
that makes me think that that was meant to be. It was meant to be that was gonna happen.
Yeah. You do kind of have to wonder if it wasn't just kind of supposed to happen.
Mhm. Now, going back a little bit, let's go back to, Northport, because that's where you had started, and you said that you worked there for how many years?
I worked in Northport for 4 years.
4 years, okay. So, you worked there for 4 years. Now, those that know, um, the Denise Amber Lee, story, that it was out of Northport there. Now,
Hmm.
you were actually, called in to assist that night, right?
Yes, I was. Yes.
How did that go down? I mean, there was so much that was going on during that time. They call you in to assist. I mean, what part did you play? Were you coming in to just kind of help field calls or pull in or even send out different teletype messages? How did that work for you on your end?
Yeah. I got a call. I live real close to the police station, so a lot of times they would call me first just because I could get there quickly. And so I got a call, and they said, she was real brief, and she said, "We've had a kidnapping. We need you to come in." And
Mhm.
that's all I knew. Um, and you tend to think children when you think kidnapping. You don't think of adults.
Right.
So I'm driving there, and I'm thinking, "Oh my gosh, some child's been taken, and all this." And I get there, and it was a small agency, so we only had two dispatchers on, and then the supervisor was on. So there was only three people working. And when you have an incident of that magnitude, you need as many hands as you can get. And so
Mhm.
when I got in there, I didn't have a whole lot to do with the call itself. I was kind of more the backup. So I was answering, fielding all the non-emergency calls, some of the 911 calls that were, of course, still happening that were not related to the incident. And yeah, I was also helping to send the teletypes and monitor the teletypes, because we were sending lots and lots of teletypes out as we got more information, suspect information, all of that kind of thing. We were sending those out and trying to make sure that we were fielding anything that came in that might give us information as well. So it was very intense, very intense.
What was the I guess what was the feeling like in there? Like, I mean, you just mentioned it was intense, but just going a step further, even for you, what I mean, what's going through your mind during that time? Like you said, 911 doesn't stop.
No.
So you've got this major incident, um, and everything else that's coming in, but you're called in, to help assist with that. You know, I imagine being in there, because this is what I would do sometimes when I was in dispatch. If I had There would be times during a big incident, whatever it may be, and I would take a couple seconds to just kind of read the room and kind of take it in, because it's it's chaotic, and there's so much that's going on. And I would take that moment just to kind of bring it in a little bit, and then go right back in. um how What was that like for you?
Sometimes it's almost surreal when
Mhm.
something of that magnitude is going on. It really does seem surreal. It's like this is really happening. This incredible, crazy situation that you usually just see on documentaries is taking place right now in front of me. And you kind of realize that as it's happening, and yet you don't have the time, like you're saying, you have that second to kind of think that, but then you don't have the time to actually really dwell on that.
Mhm.
And the entire incident happened within a matter of, I want to say it was like 8 hours, but don't quote me exactly. But, from when she was actually taken till when he was found, it wasn't a very long period of time. So I was still there when they actually pulled him over and found him. And that, I think, is the thing that I will, that feeling is what I'll remember the most, because it was such an odd mix. It was relief, and I don't want to say happiness that we found him, but you know what I mean? We were glad that he was found.
Right.
But yet she wasn't there. And so it was kind of this almost, it was just heavy. It was like, it was relief and yet heaviness, and it was surreal. The whole thing was really surreal.
I can't even imagine. Like I know exactly what you're saying. You've got this moment, this entire incident rather, that's going on, and then there's that moment where the person gets pulled over, and it's almost just gasp, like they got the person, but then you find out that she's not there. Like you said, there's that almost like yes moment, but then when you find everything else out, yeah, then you're like, well, shit, what is going on now? Where do we go from here? What do we have to do? There's maybe almost a sense of panic a little bit. Let's keep going. Let's keep doing this. Let's find where she's at, and then you get to the ultimate outcome and all. And Nathan Nathan Lee has become such a good friend of mine, and I see him as a brother. Everything that he has done. Denise's story is such a powerful one, and then for the foundation to continue and has been going on and really changed a lot of the public safety industry. The 911 space, 911 dispatchers, the certifications, all the training and everything, so that another situation like that, doesn't happen. So taking, a powerful story, a tragedy, but powerful story, to lead to triumph for the 911 industry. I mean, her story is going to live on for forever. It's always going to be there. And it's interesting. I just wanted to talk to you about that a little bit, because I think up until this point, there hasn't been a lot of talk from dispatch side, just kind of talking about what it was like in that room, during, just a lot of the incident, like you mentioned, the stuff that was going on. So thank you so much for sharing that. Now, fast forwarding years now to 2017, you ended up taking a short break from 911 dispatch, and in your email, when we had this email exchange, you said that you realized during that time that you didn't want to do anything else, that basically you had kind of learned your lesson in that break. So what was it during the break that brought you to that realization that, man, I don't think I made the right choice. Like I've learned my lesson, this is what I want to do. And you ended up going back. What was it that happened?
Well, there's always this talk when you work in dispatch. Everybody always is like, oh, the Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. Oh, I just want to work Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. I just want to do normal, I'm going to have every weekend off. And, well, I found exactly that. I found a job that was Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. And I thought, oh, this will be great. Well, one, I discovered that I hate working Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. I can't go to the post office. I can't go to the bank. I can't go to the doctor. Like, I can't get anything done. So I discovered that I hated that part of it, for one. But I kept feeling like, and I hate to say this because it sounds kind of like, what other people do doesn't matter. And that's not what I'm saying at all. But for me, I felt like what I was doing wasn't as meaningful as what I had felt 911 was.
Right.
To me, 911 was kind of like you had referenced earlier, you have the opportunity to really make a difference in somebody's life, even if it's only for those couple minutes, even if it's only to get them the ambulance that they need, whatever it may be. I feel like it really is crucial, and I feel like it's really an important and just vital part of our system. And so I didn't feel that at the job that I had. And I really love that. And when I decided to go ahead and apply it at another agency, it was so funny because they did do the sit-in where you sat in before you got hired. And I went to sit in, and I just felt so much joy just hearing that radio traffic in my ear when I did the sit-in. I was like, oh, I'm so happy. I love it. So yeah, I did. I learned my lesson. This is the thing for me. I mean, I don't see myself doing anything else.
So in that 10 months though, when you're at this other job, I'm sure coworkers asked you, so what did you do before? Or, what is kind of your background? And I'm sure you had those moments, probably many moments where you would say, well, I was an 911 dispatcher for such and such years. And then you probably told like a bunch of stories. And, that also might have contributed to the fact that you realized, damn, I really miss this. Like I want to get back into it. This isn't what I thought it was going to be or whichever. But I can see that, talking about that a lot with coworkers that know nothing about 911 or anything like that, who have never taken an emergency call, that would be intriguing for them, and which would probably keep you talking and talking and talking about it. So, yeah, I guess just asking you, what was that? Did that contribute at all?
Oh, absolutely. When you do get asked those questions and you start thinking back, and everybody always likes to say, what's the craziest call you've ever taken? And, all those kinds of things. And yeah, you can't help but think, oh gosh, I miss it, and I'm not going to have any more of these stories. I'm not going to have anything else to tell anybody, So yeah, it does contribute to it. Absolutely.
Now you end up getting back into it, and we go now to where what we were talking about at the very beginning of this episode. You're now working at a private police department in a hospital, and yes, there are real sworn officers there. How does this work? Like, so what? It's just in the hospital, in the middle of the hospital, in a separate building. Like, yeah, tell me how this works.
Yeah, it's very, very unique. So Carilion is a medical system. We do have the main hospital, which is where I actually work. But we also have, I think it's 5 other hospitals in the region. And we actually own about 200 properties in the general area. So the police department is based out of the main hospital. And they do have sworn officers, and then we also have security officers. So we dispatch for both. We dispatch for, sworn law enforcement officers who can arrest. They do carry, guns and badges and all of that. And then we also dispatch the security officers depending on what kind of calls it is. So yeah, it's a little bit different, and it's interesting because even before I started working there, everybody kind of looked at it like, oh yeah, it's a Carilion Police Department. Oh yeah, ooh, they're so serious, but you forget that anybody and everybody comes to the hospital, and everybody and anybody comes to visit the hospital, and there's psych units, and there's all kinds of things that happen on hospital property. And so you kind of don't think about that when you're outside of the environment. You just think, oh yeah, what do they do? But there's actually quite a lot that happens at the hospital, and we deal with the same folks that that you deal with in a regular law enforcement agency.
So it sounds like it's a pretty big campus then. That you're covering. So as you talk about similarities and some differences, I guess, what are some of those? First off, what are some of the differences from the centers that you have worked at compared to where you're at right now?
I think one of the big differences, well, actually, Northport, where I first started, was very, very big on community policing. So you got an officer for everything. It did not matter what the call was. As a matter of fact, I think I mentioned to you in the email that you had actually had one of my calls that you played in one of your episodes
right.
early on. And it was a person who was calling to complain about their pizza order. And you know, I was very proud of myself. I sounded very professional on the call. And I said, you know, we'll get an officer right out to you. And the guest that you had on that day actually commented and said, you know, that's unusual because depending on where you live, you wouldn't always get service, you know, and that's the truth. In Northport, you know, you got a police officer no matter what. That is not the case in most law enforcement agencies. But then when you come to the private police department, it is the case. You know, we unlock your car for you. We blow your tires up for you if you have a flat tire. You know, you get somebody no matter what your situation is, because it is a private police department and they really do cater to, you know, both the employees and the guests. So that's one of the big differences. You know, you don't get told no for anything, no matter what it is. So that is a big difference. I think, you know, universally though, I've worked in 4 different centers now, and there's always a love-hate relationship between police officers and firefighters and EMS and dispatch. Like, you know, we love them to death and they love us to death and we can't stand them. And there's, you know, always this, you know,
like siblings, you know, family.
You know, and that it doesn't matter where I've gone, that's been the same, you know, so it's very different. It's very interesting.
What about call wise? So I'm trying to picture or think about the types of calls that you take there on this campus. Really, you know, I mean, I'm sure anything can happen. Really, you know, it's 911. Anything can happen in any place. So, what are some of the calls that I guess memorable that you've kind of dealt with there at the agency that you're at?
You know, like you said, it is one of those things where you think, well, what could you possibly get? But we do get just the same kinds of things that you would get anywhere else. People have domestics on hospital property. You know, we've had, you know, women who've locked themselves in the bathrooms because the husbands are beating on the doors and screaming and yelling.
Wow.
We actually found an employee deceased on the property, you know, at one point. Because we do have a very, very large campus. We have several parking garages that are very tall, and not since I've been there, thank God, but previously we've had several people jump off of the parking garages.
Wow.
We get drugs. People bring drugs into the hospital all the time. So there's lots of those kinds of calls. You know, again, we have psych facilities, so we have lots of calls where they need stabilization for those kinds of incidents. Yeah, there's all kinds of things that you really wouldn't have anticipated. But yeah, pretty much anything that happens out in the road happens in the hospital.
So then I have kind of a stupid question. But you mentioned the call that I played on episode 130 where someone was complaining about their order. So I have to ask, because we're talking about similar calls that you take there where you're at now. I mean, do you get calls from people at the cafeteria saying that, you know, the food wasn't right? Or because I can only assume that, you know, it's probably something like that does happen.
I have not gotten one for our cafeteria where the food wasn't right. We do get people who get very upset in the cafeteria for some reason. I'm not sure why the cafeteria seems to be a hot spot for getting angry, but they do like to get very angry. And we've had people throw food on some of the employees, you know, that kind of thing. So yeah, but no complaints about the food so far. Watch, now I'll go back to work on Monday and I'll get one.
You'll have to send me an email if that happens. You're like, man, you jinxed me. You know, it's like saying the Q word in dispatch. You don't say that it's quiet.
Never.
And if if anyone is watching this now or listening to this while you're in dispatch, I apologize for saying it. Oh man. So one of the other things I want to know as well, at your center, um, how many people do you have on at a time? And then I guess, how are you working 8 hours? Is it 12 hours? I'm just trying to compare,
Mhm.
centers and stuff.
We have a boss who is very, very gracious,
Hmm.
and so she has tried to work with us all, to accommodate us the best that we can. So we actually have like kind of this mess of schedule, where we have some people working eights, we have some people working tens, we have some people working 12s. So we have just been able to kind of arrange it and make it work with us all kind of being accommodated, because like I said, she's been very, very gracious, and she's very nice to us, and tries to help us the best that she can. So yeah, so that is definitely very different, because in most centers, the schedule is the schedule and you work it and that's it.
Right.
But I happen to love 12s, as I mentioned earlier. I don't like 5 days a week.
Yeah.
So I have been very blessed, and I'm fortunate enough that I get to work the 12s. But that, like I said, some of our folks work eights or tens. Um, and we have usually two on, but not all the time.
Hmm.
Sometimes there is one of us. There was just me on a day earlier this week. It was just me for about 8 hours. So yeah, it just depends.
So is it the same at your center as it seems to be all over the place with short staffing? Like, do you deal with issues as well? Same thing?
We actually don't have a terrible amount of turnover,
Mhm.
where, that seems to be a trend, in pretty much every center, is that they have a lot of turnover and that it's hard to keep people. We don't seem to have too much of a trouble with that. Prior to me, the person that was hired before me had been there about 3 years. So yeah, it's actually pretty stable there as far as turnover and that kind of thing. So that's good.
Nice. So then overtime really isn't like a big issue or anything?
No, I mean, right now, hospitals are kind of having a little bit of trouble with, COVID-19 actually kind of caused some monetary issues in our hospital, because they canceled all the elective surgeries, all those kinds of things. So right now we're very limited on overtime, but typically, it's not a huge issue if we do get overtime or anything like that, and we don't, have to work it a lot if we don't want to.
Now, has that made things for you and everyone there really for the entire, PD and such? Um, has the pandemic made things harder or easier? And when I say easier, I mean because there's not a lot of people going in there. There's some hospitals that were, in the news were saying they were being overrun. There was other
Mhm.
ones where it's a ghost town. Um,
Mhm.
so not all of them are the same. But I was just curious, with all of this going on and the different precautions and everything else, how has that made an impact on the PD there and for all of you that are in the center?
Yeah, actually, ours was one of the centers, or not centers, hospitals that was actually kind of more ghost townish,
Mm.
where our emergency department is usually extremely busy. Yeah, we would have days and nights where there was just nobody there. So yeah, so it actually impacted us a little bit differently, in that it was actually a little, and here's that word again, quieter,
Yeah.
um, than, than normal.
Yes.
So yeah. Oh, my cat's getting ready to knock over my. Sorry
Nice.
about that.
No, 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 that's good. Uh,
But yeah, so it was actually a little calmer for us. But it's
wow.
starting to pick back up. They've started to let more people back in for various
Mhm.
different reasons. So
Now, as we go into the wrap up of this episode, it has been awesome to have you on here and learn more about you and your stories. A lot of stuff that happened in training. Um, Going into the wrap up, for those who are watching, those who are listening, anyone who is looking at, they've been working for years now in dispatch and they're looking to switch out. As we talked, you wanted to change and you realized that it wasn't, what you thought it would be. You took this short break, you experienced it and realized that dispatch is where you wanted to be. So I guess for anyone who's thinking of going out or even coming back in or whichever, what is some advice or some thoughts, based on your experience that you can share with those that are out there?
I think it's really important to know yourself.
Mhm.
I have worked, like I said, in multiple agencies, and in each of the agencies that I've worked at, there's always been at least one person that, and I don't mean this to sound mean in any way, but that really probably shouldn't still be there.
Mhm.
Somebody who maybe has kind of been there too long and has gotten kind of jaded. And I think that that's important to recognize. If you feel that you hate your job, then you need to step away. And even if you step away temporarily so that you do get perspective, and then you decide you want to come back. But I
Mhm.
think you have to be really aware of yourself and aware of your attitude and how you feel about the job. um, because like I said, it is vitally important, and we do provide a service that is 100% needed all the time. And if we can't do that with some level of compassion and joy, even though it is terrible things that we deal with, then we really probably shouldn't be doing it anymore. And so I think, you just have to put that into perspective and know if it is the thing for you or if it's not the thing for you.
Perfect. Thank you so much once
Thank
again
you.
for being on. This has been an excellent episode, and just to be able to sit here and talk with you and learn more about your entire experience. It's people who watch this, or listen rather, doing both. They'll send in messages and say, I thought that I was the only one that dealt with this or that, and it's good to know that I'm not alone. So, coming on to share your stories, it's going to help somebody out there, whether we know it personally or not. It'll end up helping someone out there who's watching or listening. So thank you again so much for being on this
Thank
episode.
you so much for having me.
So for those who are watching or listening, if you have any comments, questions, or you want to be a guest on the show, you can email us, and that'll be wttpodcast@gmail.com. And you can follow us on Twitter. That is at 901 Podcast. You can like us on Facebook. That is facebook.com/Within the Trenches Podcast. This show will always be free. However, if you're looking for bonus episodes, ad free, early access to the episodes that are coming out, whether it be video or audio, discounts to the store, swag, t-shirts, anything like that, you can check us out on patreon.com/WTT podcast. And I can't say enough, thank you for the patrons, for all the support, and everyone else. Thank you so much for that. This episode has been sponsored by InDigital as well as Rapid Deploy. And this can be heard 24/7 on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, your favorite podcasting app, and withinthetrenches.net. And the video can be seen on Facebook and YouTube. So make sure to check it out there. Have a good one, everyone. And like I said, it's July 3rd right now. You're not going to see this. When you see this, it's going to be like, I don't know, the 14th or something like that. So hopefully you had an excellent holiday. Have a good one, everybody.